You've found nightfall murmurs. When day fades into silence, the world begins to whisper. Some stories come as murmurs, some as warnings, but they all come at night. Don't be afraid to listen, but never listen alone. This silence, it breathes. That conviction settled deep in my bones as I crouched within the timbered gloom of the groundskeeper's cottage, ears straining against the night. Outside, something skittered and scraped, something alien to the pines, something wanting passage. I ought never to have come to this desolate place. Such clarity arrives only in retrospect, doesn't it? But 3 weeks prior, adrift in a sea of student loans, the shore of solvency receding with every crashing wave of bills, the advertisement shimmered like fool's gold in the digital mire. Custodian sought, Blackwood Reach Lodge, winter tenure, resilience essential, solitude expected, compensation generous, lodging provided. A chance, it seemed, to escape the city's gnawing maw, to quiet the static in my head, perhaps even to finally wrestle onto the page that phantom novel, haunting my waking thoughts. The interview? A perfunctory exchange over a crackling line with a man whose voice was gravel dragged over concrete. He cared less for my qualifications than my capacity for enduring emptiness. "Lodges shuttered till spring thaw," he rasped. "Just need eyes on the place. Keep the pipes from bursting. Generator fed. Nearest settlement's a hard day's trek. You'll be cut off. That sit right with you." I swore it did. Solitude? A balm, I thought then. A fool's paradise. Oh, the breathtaking arrogance of ignorance. The first turn of the moon was deceptively tranquil. Blackwood Reach Lodge, a titan of log and stone, slumbered high among peaks that scraped the bruised belly of the sky. Immense conifers stood sentinel, their boughs laden with snow. My tasks were trivial. Patrol the arteries of plumbing, coax the generator's iron heart to beat, chart the building's slow decay for the spring awakening. Days dissolved into wandering the snow-hushed grounds, losing myself in forgotten novels before the hearth's cyclopean eye, even coaxing hesitant words onto the page for that spectral novel. The nights, stitched with the soughing wind, the cry of a distant owl. But the peace frayed at the edges, then began to unravel. Subtle disturbances at first. A misplaced tool I was certain I'd left elsewhere. Snow marred by prints not belonging to my worn boots. Deeper and somehow wrong. A phantom susurrus, like secrets spilled on stale air from a vacant guest suite. Investigated, yielding only dust motes dancing in frigid stillness. Self-deception became my shield. Isolation's trickery, I insisted. Cabin fever's subtle rot. Routine, I chanted. Routine is the anchor. The anchor dragged. Dawn revealed the grand hall's heavy furniture contorted into a bizarre, silent tableau. Another time, returning chilled from my rounds, I found every tap in my cottage weeping scalding water, steam ghosting the floors like resentful spirits. Then came the nocturne of terror, claws whispering intimately on timber walls, ponderous footfalls thudding across the roof, shingles directly overhead. Once, a sound ripped the night, so akin to a human shriek it froze the marrow, leaving me entombed beneath blankets until the grey light crept back, a quivering statue of fear. I clawed at the useless telephone, a dead relic on the wall. My mobile, a sleek, expensive paperweight since arrival, offered no bars, no ethereal connection, no lifeline. The wire was cut, utterly, terrifyingly alone. That's when the journal surfaced. It lay nested in a cleverly hidden compartment beneath a loose drawer board in the cottage desk. A slim volume, its pages filled with script that jittered and sprawled, stark with haste and abject terror. "They are not legend," the ink screamed across the yellowed paper. "The old tales hold truth, the things that dwell between the trees, the voices on the wind. Their hunger is ancient, their fury absolute. Sweet mercy, they seek entry." The chronicle descended into a maelstrom of dread, silhouettes warping unnaturally against the wind's grain, visages glimpsed like smudges in window panes, vanishing upon direct gaze, and the suffocating, unshakable certainty of being perpetually observed. The final scroll resonated like a death knell struck deep within my own chest. "Cannot endure another night. They grow bolder. Last dark, the threshold nearly failed. I am leaving with the dawn. Reader, Silas, whoever finds these words, flee. Flee now while the path remains open, before their patience breaks." A sane man, a sensible man, would have heeded that desperate plea, packed essentials, and plunged into the frozen, indifferent wilds, trusting fate over the encroaching dark. But pride, perhaps, or some deeper, more ruinous folly, anchored me fast. A hoax, surely? Elaborate, cruel, but merely a prank left by a disturbed predecessor? Thus, I remained. And now, cocooned in this suffocating dark, the splintering percussion at the door, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs, I taste the bitter acid of my monumental mistake. It commenced just as twilight bled into true night. I was traversing the cavernous main lodge, ticking off the evening's closing rituals, when the light stuttered, gasped a final electric breath, and died. The generator, I assumed instantly, starved of fuel. But investigation proved its tank brimmed. No earthly reason existed for the sudden plunge into absolute blackness. Then, the sound, a guttural vibration, less heard than felt in the teeth, seeming to emanate from the very marrow of the mountains, from the air itself. Panic flared, a wildfire scorching through my veins. I scrambled back to the relative sanctuary of the cottage, the narrow cone of my torchlight a frantic, inadequate eye slicing the oppressive dark. The door slammed shut, scant moments before the first blow landed. Something immense, something impossibly heavy, struck the stout wood, the impact vibrating through the floorboards, rattling my teeth. Timber groaned, protesting its violation. Ancient hinges shrieked under inhuman strain. And the voices, dear God, the voices. They began as insidious murmurs beneath the frantic rhythm of my own ragged breathing, then swelled, multiplied, coalesced. A chorus of the damned, whispering, cajoling, weaving my name. Silas. Into their pleas, begging, demanding ingress. I fought to seal my ears, my mind, against the insidious, invasive onslaught. But escape, a laughable notion. The cottage, a flimsy bastion besieged on all sides. Beyond its fragile walls, the forest waited, a lightless labyrinth promising only a different, colder demise. Trapped, cornered like prey. Hours bleed together, indistinguishable in the oppressive, unending dark. The siege ebbs and flows, a cruel tide. Sometimes, only the dry, intimate rasp of claws on wood and glass, exploring weaknesses. Other times, a percussive fury that threatens to pulverize the very structure around me, to shake the logs apart. And ceaselessly, relentlessly, there are the voices. Their tune has shifted, sharpened. The pleading curdled into temptation, painting lurid visions of splendors awaiting me just beyond the threshold. Riches, renown, dominion over others, desires I barely knew I possessed, offered like poisoned fruit from a serpent's tongue. Yet beneath the silken promises, a raw, gnawing hunger resonates, an incandescent rage barely contained. These entities offer no rewards, only consumption, soul and bone. I have retreated to the bedchamber, wedged the flimsy furniture against the inner door, a gesture as futile as prayer against a hurricane. My arsenal is pathetic, a soot-stained fire iron grasped tight, a slim paring knife useless against anything not yielding, a canister of bare deterrent discovered in some forgotten closet recess, toys against titans. As I scratch these final words, huddled against the wall furthest from the groaning, splintering door, I hear them conferring outside it, their whispers weaving new, impatient strategies. The game, it seems, nears its brutal end. Soon, they will simply unmake this shelter to claim their prize. Will these pages ever be found beneath the wreckage? Will dawn ever break again for me? Let this testament, if discovered amidst the ruin, scream its warning. The darkness here is animate. It bears an ancient malice. The whispers among the pines are not wind. They carry a terrible, insatiable hunger. If you hold this, flee. Flee without hesitation or second thought. Don't repeat my folly. Don't let need, or pride, or a morbid, fatal curiosity blind you to the signs. For when the sun bleeds away behind the peaks, and the long shadows stretch their skeletal fingers across the snow, it is already too late. They will hunt you, just as they hunt me now. I hear the bedroom door splintering, the wood giving way with sickening cracks. They are nearly upon me. Time evaporates into pure terror. To whoever finds this, forgive me. Forgive my failure. Forgive that I could not turn them back, could not hold the line. Be wiser than Silas. Be swifter. And above all, when the pines whisper your name on the night wind, do not answer, because if you do, you are... The amber street lamps sputtered awake, one by one, painting elongated, dancing specters across the damp pavement as Elara rounded the final bend toward home. She hugged her satchel closer, its worn leather a familiar comfort against the rising chill. The library's quiet embrace had held her longer than intended. The walk always seemed to stretch, thin and unnerving, in the encroaching dark. It began as a flicker at the edge of her sight, a shape detaching itself from the deeper gloom half a block behind. Nothing more, perhaps, than another soul navigating the evening. Yet an unnerving cadence in the stranger's stride, a focused quality to the movement, sent an icy tendril down her spine. Elara lengthened her own steps, the pulse drumming a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Her boot heels clicked sharply on the concrete, echoing like accusations in the hushed street. She fought the primal urge to look back, fixing her gaze on the distant intersection. 3 more blocks. Just 3. Reaching the corner, a stolen, breathless glance over the shoulder confirmed her fear. The hooded silhouette had halved the distance, a mere 20 feet separating them now. Pursuit was undeniable. Panic, cold and sharp, surged through her veins. Calculation vanished. She ran. The slap of her boots became frantic, drowned out an instant later by the pursuing thud of heavier shoes hitting the pavement behind her. Her thoughts scattered like startled birds. Scream? Wave down a passing car? Her apartment building loomed, tantalizingly close, yet impossibly far. Fingers like clumsy strangers fumbled in her pocket for her phone, nearly dropping it. Even as the emergency number hovered beneath her thumb, a voice cut through the night air. "Hey, hold on!" Every nerve screamed, "Keep running!" Yet some traitorous instinct slowed her frantic pace. The voice, it snagged on a thread of familiarity. She pivoted, finger still poised, breath ragged. The hooded figure jogged closer, hands raised, palms out, a gesture of placation. As he drew nearer, the hood was pushed back, revealing a face she knew. Finn? The name escaped her lips, a gasp tangled with relief and utter bewilderment. What on earth? Finn, her neighbor from 2 floors below, offered a sheepish grin that felt wildly incongruous with the terror he'd just induced. "So sorry, didn't mean to spook you. Saw you walking, figured I'd catch up, wanted to give this back." He held aloft a dog-eared paperback, the novel she'd lent him the previous week. Her hand, trembling slightly, accepted the book. The absurdity crashed over her. You chased me down the street in the dark to return a book?" He had the grace to look genuinely embarrassed. "Yeah, listening to it now, sounds pretty bad. Didn't really think how it looked until you bolted." A shaky laugh escaped her, adrenaline slowly receding like a tide. "Okay, well, next time, maybe just wait till we're both inside the building." He nodded earnestly. "Definitely. Lesson learned. Hey, can I at least walk you the rest of the way? Promise to keep a respectable distance." A moment's hesitation, then she nodded. Despite the scare, Finn was a known quantity, harmless, if occasionally lacking social foresight. They covered the remaining blocks in a slightly stilted silence, punctuated by awkward comments about the returned novel. Ilara couldn't help but dissect the speed with which fear had consumed her, how innocence had warped into menace in the span of minutes. Yet, even as she mentally chided herself for overreacting, an insistent whisper of self-preservation argued it was better to be cautious than caught unaware, because the next shadow might not hold a well-meaning neighbor. At their building's entrance, she managed a brief goodnight, the tremor still lingering in her fingers as she fumbled with the lock. Climbing the stairs, she offered a silent thanks for the self-defense classes her parents had insisted upon years ago. Useless tonight, perhaps, but the confidence they had instilled had likely kept sheer panic at bay. Safely inside her apartment, she leaned against the solid wood of the closed door, a boundary crossed, letting out a long, shuddering breath. The acute fear began to fade, replaced by a strange, almost giddy relief. It was nothing, a misunderstanding. Yet as she prepared for bed, the disquieting hum of residual adrenaline lingered. The visceral memory of those terrified moments, the absolute certainty of malevolent pursuit, refused to fully dissipate. Sleep remained elusive. Every settling groan of the old building, every distant siren, snagged her attention, pulling her back to alertness. Around 2 a.m, defeated, she rose to make tea. Waiting for the kettle's whistle, she found herself drawn to the window, a moth to a disquieting flame. Below, the street lay quiet, bathed in the jaundiced glow of the lamps. It looked ordinary, peaceful, difficult to reconcile with the menacing stage it had seemed hours before. Then, movement. A lone figure navigating the concrete river on the opposite side. Her pulse leaped before she consciously tamped it down. Someone returning from a late shift, surely. An early jogger. But as she watched, the figure came to an abrupt halt. Slowly, with chilling deliberation, the head turned, angling impossibly upward, directly toward her window. Ilara recoiled as if struck, heart hammering against her ribs. A frantic inventory. 4 floors up, lights extinguished. She couldn't be visible. And yet... She forced her gaze back to the vacant panorama. The street was empty. No sign of the figure. Had the earlier fright fractured her perception? A phantom conjured by frayed nerves? This was absurd. She shook her head, trying to clear the static. Tomorrow, sunlight would dissolve these lingering shadows. But as she finally retreated to bed, the untouched tea cooling beside her, the unease clung like damp fabric. The familiar contours of her world felt subtly warped, the shadows deeper, potentially concealing something truly sinister. The following days unfolded under a lens of hyper-awareness. Ilara found herself perpetually scanning her surroundings, her head on a constant swivel, startling at sudden noises. She began varying her route home from work, the cold weight of newly purchased pepper spray nestled against her keys in her satchel. Concerned inquiries from friends were met with brittle dismissals. How could she articulate a fear rooted in an event that hadn't truly happened, only to be followed by... what? A hallucination? A week after the incident with Finn, the unease solidified into something colder. Laden with groceries, walking home in the early evening, she felt it again, that familiar prickle crawling up the back of her neck, the undeniable sensation of being watched. Casually, trying to quell the rise in panic, she glanced around. The street bustled with the usual evening traffic, pedestrians heading home. Nothing overtly amiss. And yet, there, across the thoroughfare, half a block back, mirroring her pace with chilling precision, stood a figure cloaked in a dark hoodie. Her breath hitched. Coincidence? It had to be. She increased her pace fractionally, heart hammering. From the corner of her eye, the figure did the same. No. Not again. Veering abruptly, she sought refuge in the bright fluorescence of a small convenience store, pretending to examine a magazine rack while her eyes darted nervously toward the street outside. The hooded figure flowed past the window without a glance, continuing down the block. A shaky breath escaped her. See? Nothing. Just a coincidence. Foolish. After lingering for several minutes, she exited the store, scanning the street anxiously. No sign of the figure. Feeling both ridiculous and profoundly unsettled, she hurried the last stretch home. It was as her key slid into the lock of her apartment door that she saw it. A small, stark white rectangle, folded neatly and tucked into the doorframe. With fingers that suddenly felt numb and clumsy, she unfolded it. 4 words printed in neat block capitals. I see you. An icy dread flooded her veins. This wasn't happening. A prank, a mistake, anything but this. She burst inside, slamming the door, the deadbolt shooting home with a loud click that offered meager comfort. Groceries spilled unheeded onto the floor as she began to pace, thoughts racing. The police? What phantom menace could she report? A vague feeling? A creepy note possibly meant for someone else? She clutched at straws. A cruel joke by someone who knew she was on edge. But deep down, a chilling certainty settled like sediment. Someone was watching, following, and they wanted her to know. The subsequent weeks bled into a nightmarish montage of paranoia. She saw the hooded figure everywhere, reflected in shop windows, across crowded squares, a fleeting shadow at the periphery. More folded threats appeared, tucked under her windshield wiper, slipped into her mailbox. Always watching. You can't hide. I'm getting closer. Sleep became a forgotten luxury, replaced by hours spent staring into the darkness, straining to hear any unfamiliar sound. Worried calls from friends and family went largely unanswered. How could she explain this isolating terror when she herself oscillated between certainty and the fear she was losing her mind? It culminated on a night slick with rain. Hurrying home, umbrella clutched like a flimsy shield against the downpour, and her own mounting dread, she saw him. There, stark beneath the sickly orange glow of a street lamp, directly in her path, facing her. No pretense of coincidence now. The figure waited. Terror locked her joints, rooting her to the wet pavement. For a long, stretched moment, only the patter of rain filled the space between them. Then, slowly, deliberately, he raised a hand, palm open, and beckoned. Something inside Ilara snapped. The paralysis shattered, replaced by a primal urge to flee. She turned and ran, heedless of direction, splashing through puddles, the sound of her own ragged breathing loud in her ears. Footsteps pounded on the pavement behind her, steady, gaining. Suddenly, a hand clamped onto her arm, spinning her around with bruising force. A raw scream tore from her throat as she lashed out blindly with the umbrella. "Whoa, hey, Ilara, it's me." Finn's face swam into view, rain plastering his hair to his forehead, his expression etched with concern and confusion. "Are you okay? I saw you running like crazy. You look terrified." Her gaze darted frantically past him, scanning the rain-swept street, searching the shadows between buildings, empty save for a few distant, curious onlookers drawn by her scream. Did you see him?" she gasped, chest heaving. "Following me?" Finn shook his head, bewildered. "No, Ilara, just you. What's going on? You've seemed off for weeks now." The adrenaline fled abruptly, leaving a residue of trembling confusion and exhaustion. Had she conjured the figure? The chase? Was this fear-fueled madness? As Finn gently guided her toward home, his concerned questions probing for answers she couldn't articulate, a decision solidified amidst the internal chaos. Tomorrow she would seek help, a therapist, someone. Because whether the threat stalking her steps was tangible, flesh and blood, or a phantom woven from her own frayed nerves, she couldn't continue living like this. But as they reached the relative safety of her building's entrance, she risked one final, backward glance down the glistening street, and there, nestled deep in the shadowed alcove across the way, almost swallowed by the darkness, she caught a fleeting glimpse of a hooded form, motionless, watching. Real or imagined, the vigil continued. Her ordeal, it seemed, was only just beginning. Lances of light from my Vespera sedan pierced the black velvet ahead, snagging on something roadside, something utterly alien to that ribbon of asphalt cutting through the Ohio wilderness. Even now, understanding settles like cold dread. I should have gunned the engine, let the radio scream, sealed myself in glass and steel, and never looked back. But curiosity, or perhaps some darker compulsion, stayed my foot. And so I write this, my fingers tracing tremors onto the page, trying to map the geography of the terror that found me on Highway 88. 6 hours I'd been wrestling the wheel, returning from a strained family visit upstate. The dashboard glowed 11:48 p.m., a digital witness to my fatigue. My vision swam, blurring the endless tunnel carved by the headlights. Vertebrae ground together in my lower back, a dull protest against the worn driver's seat. Autumn air, sharp and smelling of decay, seeped past the window seals, mocking the heater's tired hum. Highway 88 unspooled before me, desolate, flanked by skeletal trees whose branches interlaced overhead like the grasping fingers of nightmares. Streetlights were a forgotten luxury here. For the better part of an hour, mine had been the only lights painting motion onto the profound dark. My hand fumbled for the thermos beside me. It rattled, empty. A parched throat tightened. The radio, my only companion, had devolved into sputtering bursts of static miles ago, a losing battle against the encroaching wilderness. I silenced it, plunging the cabin into a near vacuum filled only by the hypnotic thrum of the engine and the rhythmic hiss of tires on pavement. It was in that heightened silence I registered it, an upright shape etched against the gravel verge, perhaps 60 yards distant. My headlights washed over it as the highway curved gently. Instinct painted it human, 6 feet tall, clad in something dark. Yet a profound stillness radiated from it, the unnerving rigidity of a taxidermied specimen, not a living being breathing the night air. My foot eased from the accelerator, a reflex born of rural caution. Stranded souls weren't unheard of out here. 60 miles per hour bled away to 40. The shape swelled in the windshield. 30, 20. Logic dictated details should sharpen, resolve into recognizable forms. They refused. The headlights now struck it full on. Barely 20 feet separated us as I crawled past at a funereal 15 miles per hour. The figure remained locked in place. It wore a long dark coat reaching its knees, yet the fabric hung preternaturally still, indifferent to the breeze that stirred the roadside weeds. Its arms dangled at its sides, impossibly long, fingertips brushing the air where knees ought to be. But the face? The face. That was the epicenter of the wrongness, the detail that sent ice flooding my veins and slicked my palms on the steering wheel. There was no face. Where eyes and nose and mouth should have resided, there existed only a pocket of absolute negation. Not shadow, not cloth, not disguise, a sheer absence, as if reality itself had been clumsily erased in that specific spot. Light touched the coat, delineated the skull's rough shape, but the void where features belonged drank the beams, swallowing them whole. The brake pedal met my foot. The Vespera whispered to a halt. Every nerve ending shrieked. Flight urged me to stomp the gas, to vanish into the night. Yet a morbid fascination, cold and sharp, pinned me there. The entity stood less than 10 feet from my window now. It offered no acknowledgement, no turn of its head. It simply was, facing the onward road, presenting that horrifying nullity. My hands shook violently. Sweat traced cold paths down my spine despite the chill. The idling engine felt obscenely loud in the sudden, crushing quiet. I couldn't wrench my gaze away. The darkness of its non-face seemed to deepen, to pulse with a chilling vitality, like staring into an abyss. Then it shifted, not with the fluid grace of muscle and bone, but with a jarring discontinuity, a stutter in reality's film. One instant it faced the highway. The next, its entire form had rotated 90 degrees, directly confronting my car. No pivot, no shuffle of feet, just an instantaneous, impossible reorientation. A strangled cry clawed its way up my throat. My foot found the accelerator and plunged it to the floor. The engine screamed, a mechanical protest tearing the night. The car bucked, lunging forward. A frantic glance in the side mirror confirmed the horror. Another glitch-like flicker, and it now occupied the center of the asphalt behind me. My taillights painted it crimson, illuminating that featureless head, canted at an angle no human neck could endure. I pushed the Vespera harder, 60, 70. The engine whined, protesting the abuse. Trees dissolved into indistinct streaks of black. In the rearview mirror, the figure diminished but remained, a stationary sentinel in the road's center, still oriented towards my frantic retreat. My grip on the wheel was a trembling vice. Keeping the car on the asphalt felt like wrestling an angry beast. The highway twisted, coiled through the forest. I took the curves recklessly, tires screaming their descent. Each time my eyes flicked to the mirror after a bend, the road behind was empty, just swallowing darkness. Perhaps 5 minutes of this madness passed before my lungs remembered how to draw a full breath. My white-knuckled grip eased fractionally. Whatever that abomination was, I had outrun it. The mirror reflected only night. I forced myself to slow to a less suicidal pace, wary of ending my flight wrapped around ancient oak. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The clock read 11:57 p.m., 9 minutes, an eternity compressed into 9 minutes. Suddenly, the radio erupted, jolting me violently. Raw static clawed from the speakers, despite my having switched it off. I stabbed the power button futilely. The static intensified, swelling in volume. The dashboard lights flickered, died, then flared erratically. My gaze shot instinctively to the rearview mirror. It occupied the back seat. The scream ripped from me, raw and uncontrolled. The car slewed violently as my arms spasmed. I fought the wheel, tires losing purchase, skidding across the worn asphalt. Through the chaos, the thing remained utterly still, that awful emptiness where its face should be aimed squarely at the back of my head. With a desperate wrench, I threw the car into a spin. Brakes howled. The world became a sickening carousel of darkness and flashing lights. 1 rotation, 2, before the Vespera shuddered to a halt, facing the wrong direction on the desolate highway. Thought evaporated, replaced by pure instinct. I slammed the door open, ejecting myself onto the cold pavement. Run! The woods beckoned, black and dense, promising concealment. But as my feet hit the gravel shoulder, the folly struck me. I was plunging into its domain, sightless, weaponless. The car's headlights were the only islands of illumination, casting long, dancing shadows among the trees. I spun, backing away from the vehicle. The rear seat appeared vacant now. The static continued its deafening roar from the radio, an impossibly loud violation of the night's stillness. A flicker of movement at the periphery. It stood beside the Vespera's trunk. No transition, no locomotion. It had simply occurred there. That light-devouring void pivoted towards me. The two long arms hung, fingers inches from the ground. I scrambled backward, stumbling on the uneven terrain. The figure jerked forward, not walking, not gliding, but advancing, in discreet, impossible jumps, closing the distance like skipped frames in a nightmare reel. My back struck rough bark, a tree. The figure halted 10 feet away. The static shrieked from the car, escalating in pitch beyond sound, into physical pain. The headlights began to strobe violently, fracturing the scene into frantic snapshots. The thing's head tilted further, impossibly far, until it was nearly horizontal to its shoulders. That void stared, unblinking because it couldn't blink. The static reached a crescendo, a piercing shriek that felt like it was drilling directly into my skull. I clamped my hands over my ears, squeezed my eyes shut. My legs buckled, and I slid down the tree trunk to the damp earth. The sound bored through my defenses. The strobing light penetrated my eyelids. Then, absolute silence. I remained huddled, trembling, eyes clamped shut, waiting. Nothing. Only my own ragged gasps and the familiar nocturnal symphony of the forest returned. Through my eyelids, only the steady, unwavering beams of my headlights. Hesitantly, I opened my eyes. The highway was deserted. My Vespera sat askew, engine humming, driver's door agape. No figure, no static. Just the chirping crickets and the sigh of a breeze through the leaves. Minutes crawled by as I stayed pressed against the tree, scanning the darkness, expecting its reappearance. It never came. Gradually, my breathing evened. Strength returned to my limbs. I approached the car with excruciating caution, every nerve taut, poised for flight. Nothing stirred but shadows animated by the wind playing with the headlights. The radio was utterly silent, though I hadn't touched it. The back seat remained empty. I slid behind the wheel, yanked the door shut, thumbed the lock. My hands still quaked as I shifted into drive. Checking every mirror with obsessive frequency, I maneuvered the car around and pointed it down the highway, accelerating far beyond any sensible speed for the treacherous curves. The 2 hours remaining dissolved in a haze of adrenaline and paranoia. Every roadside shadow became a potential horror. Every whisper of radio interference sent jolts of ice through my gut, but the figure did not reappear. When my tires finally crunched onto my gravel driveway, the eastern sky bled a bruised pre-dawn gray. I killed the engine and sat for a long time, staring blankly ahead. Logic clawed for purchase, offering explanations. Exhaustion, stress, a waking nightmare conjured by caffeine and sleeplessness. But the image persisted, seared onto my mind's eye. The void where a face should be. The fractured, impossible movements. the fundamental wrongness of its existence. Inside, I performed the rituals of the terrified. Bolts slid home, curtains drawn tight. I sat in the dim living room as true dawn painted the windows, sleep an unattainable shore. I phoned in sick, mumbling excuses. The day was spent wrestling shadows, trying to convince myself it hadn't been real. But last night, precisely 24 hours after that first roadside sighting, my radio clicked on, unbidden. Static at first. Then, woven beneath the white noise, a sound emerged. Breathing, but distorted, wet, ragged, seeming to emanate from the very air around me. I scrambled to the window, peering into the gloom. There it stood, on my front lawn, that blank negation of a face tilted upward toward my window. As I watched, paralyzed, it jerked closer to the house. Closer, closer. I write this huddled in my bedroom closet. The static swells, a tidal wave of noise. The breathing rasps, louder now. I hear it navigating my home, those disjointed, glitching movements drawing nearer. It's at my bedroom door. The handle turns, slow, deliberate. I don't know its purpose. I don't know why me. But this I know with chilling certainty. If you find yourself on a lonely road late at night, and your headlights illuminate a solitary figure on the verge, do not slow down. Do not stop. Drive like hell itself is on your heels, and pray you haven't caught its attention. The closet door is opening. A ripple of laughter, thin and sharp, fractured the night's deep hush, yanking me from sleep. For one dissolving instant, warmth bloomed. Maya, my little sprite, escaping her bed for midnight games. Then the warmth curdled, iced over by two jagged truths. That sound wasn't Maya's bright peal, and it echoed from within these unfamiliar walls. My name is Alara Vance. My daughter, Maya, is 5. 6 months we've nested here, in this pocket of anonymous suburbia, seeking quiet anchorage after the wreckage of divorce. Until this moment, our gravest concern was the rhythm of a life rebuilt, brick by fragile brick. Now pinned to my mattress by a sound that didn't belong, listening to that uncanny mirth drift through our rented sanctuary, I understood the flimsy nature of perceived safety. Phosphorescent green numerals on the bedside clock glared, 3:17 a.m. The soul's hour, my grandmother had whispered, her voice thick with old-world dread. I'd always dismissed such notions, relics of a less enlightened time. Yet a cold, primal certainty gripped me now, bypassing reason entirely. The laughter chimed again, nearer this time, weaving closer through the darkness. It possessed the cadence of a child, yet warped, as if spun on a warped, dusty vinyl. Motherhood, fierce and absolute, finally snapped the tendons of my paralysis. Maya. I had to reach Maya. I slid from the sheets, the chill of the polished floorboards biting at my bare soles. The hallway stretched before me, a gullet of shadow and implied threat. A switch beckoned, promising clarity, but instinct recoiled. If something, someone, shared this space, light was betrayal. I moved like a phantom down the corridor. Abruptly, the laughter ceased. The ensuing silence pressed in, heavy with unvoiced menace, far worse than the sound it replaced. Outside Maya's door, my palms slick against the cool metal knob. I held my breath, then pushed inward. Moonlight, strained through cheap floral curtains, painted a ghostly wash across her small bed. My pulse stuttered. The bed was empty, blankets violently disturbed. Where was she? Maya! The whisper was a thread of sound, lost almost before it left my lips. Sparrow, where are you hiding? Only silence answered. I drifted further into the room, a frantic sweep under the bed, a desperate search within the cramped closet, yielding nothing. Then, from below, a floorboard groaned under weight. My heart hammered against my ribs. I crept to the stairwell's precipice. The ground floor lay submerged in profound darkness, save for a faint, pulsing luminescence emanating from the living room. Slowly, agonizingly, I descended, each step a potential alarm. At the bottom, a detail stopped my breath, froze the blood in my veins. The front door stood agape, inviting the damp night air inside. Tracks of dark, wet earth marred the entryway, leading directly towards the living room. The glow, I now realized, pulsed from Maya's treasured nightlight, a whimsical glass fairy. It belonged upstairs, guarding her sleep. Why was it here? Reaching the living room archway, every cell screamed retreat, urged me to flee into the night, dial for help. But Maya remained unaccounted for. I couldn't abandon her. Peering cautiously around the doorframe, my world tilted. There, seated lotus-style in the room's center, was Maya. Her back faced me, the familiar unicorns prancing across her pajamas. A wave of dizzying relief washed over me, swiftly receding as I registered she wasn't alone. Opposite her sat something else. The fairy light cast insufficient illumination, revealing only a silhouette roughly Maya's height, yet fundamentally wrong. Its limbs seemed stretched, attenuated, its head disproportionately large, oddly shaped. They seemed engrossed in a silent game, passing small, indistinct objects back and forth across the floor. As I watched, trapped between disbelief and terror, Maya let out a soft giggle. It was her sound, the very one I'd mistaken earlier, yet now it felt subtly altered, too knowing, too ancient for my 5-year-old. The figure across from her responded, emitting a dreadful mimicry of Maya's laugh. The sound scraped against my nerves. The laughter that had woken me, I knew with sickening certainty. Perhaps I gasped, perhaps a floorboard betrayed me. Both figures swiveled towards me in uncanny unison. Maya's face was a placid mask, her eyes vacant like a doll's. But the other, bathed in the fairy's faint-colored light, its features swam into focus. It resembled a child's malformed clay effigy of a face. The components were present: eyes, nose, mouth, but hideously distorted. The eyes were vast, obsidian pools, reflecting the nightlight's glow like captured stars. The nose, merely 2 dark cavities. And the mouth, stretched into an impossible, tooth-filled rictus that threatened to cleave its face in two. "Mommy," Maya intoned, her voice flat, devoid of inflection. "Come play." The thing inclined its oversized head in a jerky, unnatural nod, its grin impossibly stretched wider. "Yes, Mommy," it echoed, a perfect, chilling replication of Maya's voice. "Come play." I stood rooted, paralyzed by a fear so profound it felt like suffocation. My mind bucked against the reality unfolding before me. A dream, surely. Yet the cool draft from the open door kissed my skin. The scent of damp soil filled my nostrils. The fairy light pulsed with undeniable presence. It was terrifyingly, inescapably real. "Maya!" I forced the name through a constricted throat. "Come here, little bird. Come to Mommy." Maya remained motionless, her gaze fixed and empty. The creature, however, began to stir. It unfolded, limbs extending like brittle twigs, rising, stretching to an impossible height until it towered over Maya, a looming shadow over us both. "She stays," it declared, still using Maya's stolen voice. "She belongs to us now." Terror warred with a primal maternal fury. This entity, this abomination, dared to claim my child. Nightmare or not, real or imagined, I would not surrender her. I surged forward, intent on snatching Maya, on escaping this madness. The instant I crossed the threshold into the living room, the fairy nightlight extinguished, plunging the world into absolute blackness. Maya screamed, a pure, visceral sound of terror that sliced through the dark and into my soul. "Maya!" I cried out, flailing blindly. My fingers brushed against something cold, yielding, damp, something that writhed beneath my touch. I recoiled instinctively, stumbling backward. Suddenly, the overhead lights blazed on, searing my retinas. I blinked against the brutal glare, vision swimming. As the room swam back into focus, I saw Maya by the light switch, her small hand still raised. She looked bewildered, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Mommy?" Her voice was small, fragile, laced with fear. "What happened? Why are we downstairs?" My gaze darted wildly around the room. The creature was gone. The muddy footprints, the gaping front door, all vanished without a trace, as if the preceding minutes had been nothing more than a hallucination. I scrambled towards Maya, sweeping her into my arms, holding her fiercely, grounding myself in the solid warmth of her small body. I buried my face in her hair, inhaling her familiar scent, tears of raw relief stinging my eyes. "It's okay, Sparrow," I murmured, the reassurance as much for myself as for her. "Everything's fine. You were just sleepwalking, my love." Even as the words left my mouth, a cold certainty settled in my gut. It wasn't true. The image of that thing, its distorted visage, its impossible grin, was seared onto my memory. The echo of its copied laughter, the phantom sensation of its cold, clammy skin. It had possessed a terrible reality. I carried Maya back upstairs, my eyes scanning every shadow, every darkened corner with renewed vigilance. As I tucked her back into bed, she looked up at me, her eyes wide and unnervingly clear. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice already thick with impending sleep. "Who was that boy I was playing with?" Ice traced a path down my spine. "What boy, sweetie?" Maya yawned, her eyelids fluttering closed. "The funny-looking boy. He said he wanted to be my friend forever. He said he'd come back, soon." I sat beside her, stroking her hair long after her breathing evened out into sleep, my thoughts racing in frantic circles. What horror had visited us tonight? What was that entity? And why Maya? The most chilling question lingered. Would it keep its promise? As the first tentative rays of dawn painted the sky in bruised purples and grays, resolve hardened within me. We couldn't remain here. Whatever darkness had breached our walls had found us once. It could find us again. I began packing, mechanically stuffing clothes and necessities into suitcases. We would leave the moment Maya awoke. Destination unknown, irrelevant. Anywhere felt safer than this house. Zipping the final suitcase closed, a flicker of movement in the vanity mirror snagged my attention. For a heart-stopping fraction of a second, I saw it. That impossibly wide, toothy grin, those vacant black eyes staring back from the glass. I whirled around, pulse frantic, but the room was empty. Turning back to the mirror, my own reflection confronted me, pale, eyes wide with terror. But as I watched, frozen, my reflection's lips curled upwards, stretching into a grotesque smile that was utterly alien. "See you soon, Mommy," it whispered in Maya's perfect, innocent voice. The mirror fractured, a spiderweb of cracks radiating outwards from the grinning visage. I stumbled back, a scream finally tearing free from my throat. In that shattering moment, the truth resonated with chilling finality. We could run, flee across continents, but it wouldn't matter. Whatever had entered our lives in the deepest hour of the night wasn't finished. This wasn't the end of the nightmare, it was merely the beginning. A tremor ran through my hand, the utility knife feeling alien against my palm, the flashlight beam a nervous tremor against the subterranean gloom of Silas's cellar. This was not how I envisioned morning, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Nor did I anticipate the hidden shelf, revealed like a secret wound in the wall, crammed with diminutive figures staring blankly forward, some fragmented, others veiled in dust so thick their faces were mere suggestions in the dimness. But there they were, and their discovery fractured the mundane task ahead into something altogether different. Silas had passed months prior, leaving behind this husk of a house, bequeathed to the family collective. Clara, my aunt, navigated the labyrinth of legalities, duty, or perhaps a misplaced sense of obligation that gnawed sharper than grief, fell to me for the clearing out. The others pleaded busyness, so I drove out one weekend, girding myself for drudgery. The basement, exhaling a breath rank with mold, beckoned first, best to wrestle the beast before facing the lesser demons upstairs. The cellar door groaned open onto cooler, damper air. My light sliced downwards, illuminating concrete steps, each edge nibbled away by time and damp. I descended cautiously, wary of slick patches. An overhead bulb flickered weakly, a failing pulse in the darkness, barely illuminating the concrete confines, the skeletal shelves, the stacks of dusty cartons. Normalcy, thin as veneer. I began with the obvious detritus: fractured furniture carcasses, obsolete appliances silent as tombs, a warped stack of vinyl LPs shedding brittle flakes. Piles formed. Then, behind a bulwark of mildewed books whose spines had softened like old cheese, a recess yawned in the far wall. 2 heavy cartons, protesting with groans as I shoved them aside, guarded the space. When the view cleared, I froze. An unsettling tableau greeted my light. Ranks of diminutive figures, silent sentinels coated in the velvet dust of years. Porcelain visages cracked into spiderwebs of age. A disembodied puppet head, its painted grin flaking malevolently around the articulated jaw, the tattered remnants of a tiki bar dancer, her grass skirt shredded like ancient parchment. Most were small, yet their collective gaze felt immense, unnerving. Dust and grime formed shrouds, but could not fully obscure the frozen expressions beneath. A chill, unrelated to the cellar's temperature, snaked up my spine. My fingers closed around one, surprisingly dense, cold ceramic bleeding through my glove. Its glass eyes, fixed and vacant, somehow felt acutely aware, tracking my movement in the periphery. A trick of light, I insisted silently. I consigned it and its brethren to a cardboard sarcophagus destined for the thrift store pyre. Beyond their inherent creepiness, I gave them little thought then. After 2 hours breathing the stale subterranean air, my throat raw, I declared truce for the day. Light extinguished, locks secured, I retreated to Clara's, mere streets away. The short drive felt elongated, the familiar neighborhood imbued with a new strangeness. Clara met me at the threshold, her query about progress met with my account of the dolls. A flicker of distaste crossed her features. Silas had a magpie's eye for the peculiar, she murmured, confirming his penchant for flea market oddities. Brought home the most baffling things. None of us ever grasped the fascination. Dinner conversation drifted elsewhere, the dolls momentarily forgotten. But sleep offered no refuge. Around 3 a.m., I surfaced violently from a dream, drenched in a chilling sweat. I was back in the cellar's embrace, but the flashlight was gone. In the oppressive dimness, a sound, movement. I turned. A silhouette coalesced near the wall, impossibly tall, its form indistinct save for the stark grinning mask of the puppet head. The body remained a blur, a column of deeper shadow, but the face was hideously clear. Its wooden mouth clacked open and shut, emitting no words, only a dry, chitinous scraping, like bone dragged across stone. I convulsed awake. Sitting bolt upright, I gasped for air, my shirt clinging damply. The phone screen glared, 3:03. My heart thudded, a frantic drum against my ribs. Calm down. Then, a faint susurrus from the hallway, floorboards whispering under impossibly light treads. I held my breath, straining, every nerve alight. 10 seconds stretched into an eternity of silence. House settling. Clara. Rationalizations felt thin. Sleep eventually reclaimed me, but fitfully. Over morning coffee, I relayed the nightmare, attempting nonchalance. Clara's gaze grew distant, serious. Towards the end, she confided, her voice hushed. Silas spoke of disturbances, seeing things. One doll, specifically, though he never said which, he claimed it moved, watched him. She dismissed it as dementia, medication's phantoms. Now her certainty wavered. I tried to laugh it off, a brittle, unconvincing sound. But the image of the dream figure lingered, sharp and cold. Later, returning to the house, a grim determination propelled me towards the cellar. Those dolls needed to be gone. The air clung colder still, the lone bulb stuttering like a failing heart, unnerving me enough to set up a portable work lamp, flooding a corner with stark, honest light. I approached the shelf, armed with a fresh box and gloves against the pervasive dust. One by one they came off. The puppet head, the faded hula dancer, a clown with crazed, cracked makeup, several generic porcelain figures with vacant stares. I lined them up inside the cardboard confines. The shelf, I realized, plunged deeper than initially apparent, revealing a second rank hidden in shadow. The last one I retrieved wore a painted black bow tie. its glass eyes like chips of obsidian that drank the light. Lifting it sent a jolt through my gut. Fabric arms dangled limply from its shoulders. Its hair, some brittle synthetic fiber, felt disturbingly coarse. I placed it swiftly in the box, avoiding its gaze. Sealing the carton with tape, I scrawled "Dolls" across the top, my hand unsteady. I shoved it aside, ready for removal. Turning for another empty box, a distinct creak echoed from behind. Wood fibers protesting pressure. I whirled, heart leaping, marker clattering to the concrete. The box sat inert. Nothing stirred. Jumpy. I retrieved the marker, pocketed it, and tried to focus on sorting books. But my nerves were frayed wires. Every rustle, every shadow seemed suspect. My gaze kept snapping back to the box, half expecting a shift, a subtle repositioning. The remainder of the day crawled by under a pall of tension. Clara's spare room offered little sanctuary that night. Sleep became a drowning pool. I dreamt I hefted the doll box, but it sloshed, impossibly filled with murky water. Their faces bobbed at the surface, eyes wide, mouths O's of silent screams. One lurched upwards, a pale hand extending, fingers grasping. A phantom pressure clamped onto my arm, wrenching me awake with a strangled cry. My own limb, numb from awkward slumber, tingled with the ghost of that touch. Sweat slicked my neck. My throat felt scraped raw. A glass of water seemed essential. In the hallway, Clara's door remained shut. Silence, save for the refrigerator's low hum. My pulse gradually slowed. Back in bed, sleep remained elusive. The next day, I voiced my intention to discard the dolls. Clara met my suggestion with a shrug, yet hinted at Silas's unknown intentions. Had he meant to sell them, or did they hold some other significance? A paralysis took hold, revulsion warring with a strange reluctance to erase this peculiar fragment of Silas's existence. I decided procrastination was the lesser evil. They would remain in the cellar, sealed, until the rest of the house yielded its secrets. Then, donation. Over the following days, I purged Silas's accumulated life into bags and boxes, ferrying loads to the donation center. The doll box remained untouched, its taped lid a boundary I wouldn't cross. But the nightly phantasmagoria became a ritual. The cellar, the grinning figure, its presence growing bolder, closer. Sometimes, upon waking, the phantom footfalls whispered in the hall again. A shuffle, a soft tread. I kept my phone close, flashlight app ready, but investigations revealed only emptiness. Clara noted my frayed appearance. Stress, I mumbled. She didn't press. One evening, lingering over plates, I probed again about Silas's final months. He insisted it followed him, Clara admitted, unease flickering in her eyes. Said he'd glimpse it, just at the edge of sight, watching from doorways. She still blamed the medicine, the aging mind, yet her conviction wavered. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. My attempt at a scoff died in my throat. Sleep that night came late, wrestled from exhaustion. On my final day, I descended into the cellar with forced confidence, resolved to excise the dolls. Lights blazing, the sputtering overhead bulb augmented by my work lamp, felt like flimsy armor. The box waited, gravid with its silent occupants. Lifting it, my muscles protested. It seemed amplified in weight. Imagination, surely. I began the ascent, step by laborious step, a strain pulling in my lower back. Halfway up, a sound intruded. Scritch, scritch, faint, insistent, unmistakable, like tiny claws on cardboard, originating from within the box, resting against my knee. I froze, leaning heavily, listening. Silence. I shifted my weight. Scritch. A glacial chill traced my spine. My breath hitched. Acting normal felt impossible, my legs quivering slightly. Cardboard rubbing, I told myself, the lie thin as tracing paper. Scritch. Jaw clenched, I forced myself upward, the sound seeming to follow, scraping against the inside of the carton with each step. Reaching the top felt like surfacing from deep water, gasping, sweat cooling on my skin. Beside the front door, the box seemed to hum with latent energy. Hands trembling, I opened the car's boot, setting the container down with excessive care. My gaze snagged on the taped seams, a ludicrous fear of eruption tightening my chest. Of course, nothing happened. Boot slammed shut, a deep breath taken. My face felt flushed, stomach churning. Sliding into the driver's seat, engine catching, hands gripping the wheel, white-knuckled. A final glance at the house in the rearview mirror. Then, onto the road. Away. But the turn-off for the donation center slipped past, unheeded. Some internal governor refused engagement. A knot of dread, sharp and illogical, constricted my throat at the thought of unleashing these things, this feeling, upon the world via a thrift store shelf, an unsuspecting buyer. The car, seemingly of its own volition, found its way back to Clara's. Parked in her drive, engine idling, I wrestled with the rising panic. Then, silence. Inside, I offered no explanation for the box remaining in my car, just mumbled about needing another night. Clara, blessedly incurious, agreed. Sleep was impossible. Hours spent staring into the darkness, acutely aware of the cargo in my boot, the nightmares, the scratching, echoes in my waking mind. Throw them away, lock them up. The dilemma circled endlessly. Morning would bring clarity, I promised myself. That night, the cellar dreamscape achieved a new peak of horror. The watcher detached itself from the shadows, advancing with the stop-motion gait of a poorly manipulated marionette. Its puppet head lolled, the painted mouth gaping. Skeletal arms draped in shadow reached. I awoke suffocating, tangled in sweat-soaked sheets, the paralysis of the dream lingering like a physical weight. Morning light revealed the box in the boot, undisturbed. Tape intact, a fine layer of road dust settled on top. I slammed the lid shut, went inside, lied to Clara about having completed the donations, and made my farewells. The highway unfurled, tension knotting my shoulders. Every glance in the rearview mirror conjured images of the dolls jostling within their cardboard prison. A chill persisted despite the car's warmth. It resides now in my own garage, a sealed cube of dread amidst the mundane clutter of tools and stored belongings. The tape remains unbroken. One impulse screams to hurl it into the nearest landfill, to sever the connection. Yet a chilling counterthought persists. Silas's obsession, the scratching on the stairs, the illogical fear that disposal is not dismissal, merely relocation. Nights are punctuated by imagined acoustics, the whisper of tiny feet on concrete, a faint tap, tap, tap from the garage's direction. Investigation reveals nothing but my own reflection in the dark windows, my own strained face staring back, but the feeling lingers, a cold certainty prickling the nape of my neck. I haven't dared open the box. sleep promises only a return visit from the grinning effigy in the cellar darkness, followed by the inevitable jolt awake, heart pounding, straining to hear those phantom footfalls just outside my door. And I stand here, often in the quiet hum of my own home, staring at the box, paralyzed by the knowledge that whatever Silas collected, whatever now resides within that cardboard, is inextricably, terrifyingly mine. The shriek tore through the sepulchral silence of Blackwood Sanatorium's condemned north wing, a sound so raw it felt like tearing fabric in the dead air, vibrating through the marrow of my bones. I froze mid-step, the cone of my flashlight wavering across a vista of peeling paint and spectral shadows. 3 years I'd walked these halls as a night nurse, accustomed to the nocturnal chorus of troubled minds. But this was a note of pure, undiluted terror. Investigating it, I sensed even then, was to step across a threshold into a darkness I hadn't conceived. Blackwood was old, a repository of sorrows, and I'd thought its depths held no surprises for me. The night rota was usually a predictable rhythm of quiet footsteps, hushed checks, the rattle of the medication cart. Yet lately, whispers had slithered among the staff, like drafts under ill-fitting doors, tales of phantom movements in the derelict wing, inexplicable noises, electronics flickering into brief, erratic life. Management waved dismissive hands, citing settling foundations and the fertile imaginations of the overtired. But standing there, pulse hammering a frantic tattoo against my ribs, the cold certainty settled. This was no phantom conjured by fatigue. Again, the cry came, thinner now, frayed at the edges, yet undeniably human. It emanated from the north wing, swallowed months ago by dust sheets and locked doors, ostensibly awaiting a renovation that never began. Protocol screamed, call security, screamed, back up. Instead, an invisible tether pulled me, a morbid curiosity perhaps, or some deeply ingrained foolish compulsion to mend what was broken. My feet carried me toward the heavy, forbidding door that sealed the wing off from the present. Groaning on rusted hinges, the barrier yielded to my push, releasing a sigh of stale air, thick with the cloying perfume of dust and time's slow rot. My flashlight beam sliced through the gloom, illuminating corridors choked with forgotten gurneys shrouded in white, like coffins awaiting burial. Hello? My voice, thin and reedy, was swallowed by the oppressive stillness. Is anyone in distress? Only the vast, echoing silence of abandonment answered. One hesitant step, then another. Floorboards moaned beneath my weight, each creak an accusation in this forgotten realm. Deeper I ventured, the very atmosphere seeming to curdle around me. A distinct chill permeated the air, raising gooseflesh despite the lack of any discernible draft. My flashlight sputtered, the beam dimming precariously. Fool! I cursed myself. Never checked the batteries. Just as I resolved to retreat, a sound reached me, a faint, choked whimper drifting from a room further down the corridor. My heart leaped, a frantic bird against my ribs. I crept toward the door, hanging slightly ajar. Pushing it inward precipitated another screech of tortured metal. Hello? I whispered, pitching my voice low, soothing. I'm a nurse, Ilara Vance. I can help you. At first, the room seemed empty, a black maw barely illuminated by my dying light. Then, a flicker of movement in the far corner. A figure, huddled small, trembling violently against the damp-stained wall. Slowly, palms up, I advanced. "It's all right," I murmured. "You're safe here with me. Can you tell me your name?" The figure stirred, lifting a face from the shadows, and I fought back a gasp. A man, gaunt and ravaged. Hair, long and tangled like ancient roots. Beard, a wild thicket. His eyes, luminous with a feverish intensity, darted frantically before fixing on me. "Clara," he rasped, the word cracking, dry as dead leaves. I stopped dead. Not my name, but the desperate hope woven into that single syllable sent a frigid tendril down my spine. "No," I answered gently, keeping my tone even. "My name is Elara. I'm a nurse. Who are you? How did you come to be here?" He shook his head, a frantic, bird-like motion. No, it is you. Clara, she told me you would come. The doctor said you'd return for me." My thoughts raced, trying to stitch together the fractured pieces. This man was profoundly lost, adrift in delusion. But the locked wing? His presence here? "Who told you I would come back?" I asked, striving for calm. "The doctor," he breathed, eyes flicking nervously towards the shadowed corners, as if expecting spectral company. "She said, wait, and Clara would come, but you didn't. Why did you leave me here, Clara? Why?" An icy knot tightened in my gut, a flicker of recognition, elusive, unsettling. I dredged my memory, searching for a face, a file, and then it struck me with the force of a physical blow, the disappearance. 6 months prior, just before this wing was shuttered, a patient had vanished. Silas Thorne. Police inquiries yielded nothing. The assumption hardened into fact. He'd slipped away, swallowed by the anonymous streets. But he hadn't escaped. He'd been entombed. Silas? The name felt heavy on my tongue, dredged from the dusty archives of institutional memory. Silas Thorne? His eyes widened, a spark igniting in their fevered depths. "You remember?" The words burst out, accompanied by a skeletal grin that stretched his lips unnervingly. "I knew it! Clara, I knew you wouldn't abandon me." I drew a steadying breath. "Silas, my name is Elara. I'm not Clara, but I am here to help. We need to get you out of this place. You need proper care, a real doctor." His brief animation collapsed. The grin vanished. "No," he whispered, shrinking back. "Can't leave," she said. "Stay here. It's not safe. Out there." "Who said that, Silas?" I pressed, a dreadful suspicion solidifying in my mind. "The doctor," he repeated, voice barely audible. "Dr. Moreau." My blood turned to ice water. Dr. Althea Moreau. She had overseen this wing before its closure, retiring abruptly in the wake of Silas's vanishing act. "Silas," I said, choosing my words with utmost care. "Dr. Moreau isn't here anymore. She retired months ago. Whatever she might have told you, it isn't safe for you. Here." He stared, confusion warring with ingrained fear in his haunted eyes. "But she comes, every night, brings food, tells me stories about outside. How dangerous." Nausea rose in my throat. Had Moreau truly imprisoned him here? For months? Unseen? Unheard? Why? The questions clawed at my composure. I extended a hand. "Silas, please, come with me now. I promise I'll keep you safe." He hesitated, his gaze flickering between my hand and the oppressive shadows. Then, slowly, tentatively, his fingers brushed mine. His hand was unnaturally cold, trembling like a trapped bird. I helped him rise, his frailty shocking. We'd barely reached the threshold when a voice, silken yet sharp as broken glass, cut through the silence behind us. "And just where do you imagine you're taking my patient?" I spun around, heart seizing. There, detaching herself from the deepest shadows near the doorway, stood Dr. Althea Moreau. She was altered. Her usually immaculate silver hair was escaping its bun in wild strands. Her eyes held a disturbing predatory gleam, and her lab coat, once pristine, was stained and rumpled. "Dr. Moreau?" My voice was steadier than I felt. "What is happening? Why is Silas still confined here?" A laugh escaped her lips, high and brittle, devoid of humor. It skittered along my nerves. "Oh, my dear Alara, you wouldn't grasp it. None of you ever did. Silas perceives. He sees the unvarnished truth of this world. He understands the perils beyond these walls." I felt Silas's grip tighten on my hand, his trembling intensifying, whether from terror or a strange excitement I couldn't decipher. "Whatever delusion you're clinging to, Doctor, it ends now," I stated, injecting a firmness I didn't possess. "I'm taking Silas out. He needs medical attention." Moreau's expression hardened, her features sharpening into a predatory mask. "That, I'm afraid, is not an option," she murmured, her hand slipping into her pocket. The faint glint of polished steel stopped my breath. A scalpel. "Silas must remain here. Protected," she continued, her tone shifting to a dreadful, soothing cadence, almost hypnotic. "And now that you know, my dear, you must stay as well. Don't fret. Enlightenment comes to all who wait. You'll see the truth just as Silas does." She advanced a step, the scalpel held loosely, purposefully. I stumbled backward, pulling Silas with me, my mind frantically scrabbling for an escape from this waking nightmare. Then, piercing the suffocating tension, came the rhythmic tread of footsteps echoing down the main corridor, the security guard on his rounds. A prayer I hadn't known I possessed was answered. "Help!" The scream ripped from my throat, bouncing off the decaying walls. "In here! Help us!" Dr. Moreau's eyes widened, a flicker of panic disrupting her chilling composure. She lunged, but adrenaline lent me speed. I slammed the heavy door shut, bracing against it with every ounce of strength as she began to hammer furiously on the other side. Heavy footsteps pounded closer, shouts erupted, and suddenly other hands were there, pulling Silas and me away from the door, into the relative sanity of the lit hallway. The aftermath was a blur, the controlled chaos of security wrestling Moreau into submission, paramedics murmuring reassurances as they tended to Silas, the arrival of police officers with their notebooks and probing questions. I moved through it numbly, detached. As they gently guided Silas away, his haunted eyes met mine one last time. Fear still resided there, undeniably, but beneath it, perhaps, the faintest glimmer of something else, nascent hope, or the first tentative stirring of a mind returning from a long, dark journey. What comes next remains shrouded. Inquiries, reports, the inevitable legal fallout. But sitting here now, the sterile quiet of the staff room, a stark contrast to the wing's decay, recounting the night's horrors, I feel not just relief, but a profound, lingering disquiet. Because Blackwood has taught me a chilling lesson. Sometimes the true monsters aren't the ones locked away. Sometimes they wear the faces we trust implicitly. And in a place where the line between lucidity and lunacy is perpetually blurred, who can truly say which side of that fragile boundary any of us inhabit? A week had dissolved since the keys to this small house, nestled on a street, hushed and unassuming, had passed into my hand. My battered sedan coughed into silence in the abbreviated driveway as I surveyed the terrain. Lawns neatly manicured, houses cast from a similar, simple mold, a portrait of suburban equilibrium. Nothing jarred, nothing snagged the eye, save perhaps the dwelling adjacent to mine on the left. It squatted behind sealed eyelids of shutters, its lawn a shaggy, untended fringe hinting at neglect. A minor dissonance I initially dismissed. Some folks let things go, I reasoned, no concern of mine. That inaugural night, sleep, that elusive balm after the upheaval of relocation, refused its solace. Deep past midnight, adrift in the unfamiliar darkness, a sound began to seep through the wall. Not the skittering claws of some nocturnal creature, nor the wind's lonely sigh, but something undeniably human, a thread of sorrow, thin yet persistent, weaving through the plaster. Muffled, yes, but the cadence was unmistakable, soft, choked sobbing, punctuated by pauses that spoke of a desperate attempt at control. I rose, ghosting to the window. Through the glass, the adjacent house remained a block of impenetrable shadow, lightless, carless. Nothing stirred. Cracking the window open a fraction, I strained to listen. 10 minutes, perhaps. The sound frayed the silence, then abruptly sheared off, leaving a void deeper than before. Morning found me rapping on the door across the asphalt river of the street. A man whose face seemed worn smooth by years, clad in the unassuming uniform of weekend chores, grey cotton, faded denim, answered. "Leo," I offered, extending a hand. "Just moved in next door." I gestured towards the shuttered house. "Wondered about that place?" His gaze flicked towards it, a flicker devoid of curiosity, before returning to me. "Been vacant," he clipped, the words flat as stone. "Years now." A frown creased my brow. "But last night, I heard weeping, from inside I'm certain." A shrug, minimal, dismissive. "Nobody's home there. Owner cleared out ages ago. Must have been a stray cat. Wind, maybe." The finality in his tone was a closing door, mirrored by the physical one moments later. Later, further down the pavement's ribbon, a woman, vitality etched in the lines around her eyes, clad in shorts and trainers, tended her thirsty blooms. My introduction and inquiry yielded only confusion, clouded features mirroring the previous denial. The same refrain, empty, perhaps 8 years. A silent enigma on the street. She'd never heard a thing. The afternoon bled away in the ritual of nesting, boxes yielding their contents, furniture finding its place, the refrigerator humming with rudimentary provisions. Yet beneath the surface bustle, a dissonant chord hummed. The memory of that sound, the neighbor's casual certainty, warring with the conviction of my own ears. That was no animal. As midnight painted the windows black, I extinguished the lamps, becoming a sentinel near the wall that separated my rented normalcy from the adjacent unknown. Around 12:30, it returned. A low thrum of grief, swelling, undeniable. Closer this time, or perhaps my senses were merely honed, human unmistakably. Ear pressed to the cool plaster, I strained, the faint vibration a ghostly touch. The air conditioner silenced, the world reduced to that single sorrowful pulse. For a solid 10 minutes it persisted, a rhythm of despair, before dissolving back into silence. A cold knot tightened in my gut. This wasn't right. Not echoes, not wind. The urge to summon authority warred with the absurdity of the premise. Phantom tears in a vacant house. Calling the police felt like inviting ridicule. Still, the not knowing festered. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow I would breach the perimeter, seek answers beyond neighborly dismissal. The next day dawned warm. Around noon, I approached the silent house. Sunlight, sharp and unforgiving, exposed its neglect. Weeds thrust defiantly through parched earth. Dust lay thick on the porch steps like a shroud. Paint peeled from the door in leprous curls beneath a cracked, sun-bleached welcome mat. Shuttered eyes remained sealed. Windows blank and reflective. The brass knob, cold and unyielding under my tentative grip. Even the mail slot offered no ingress, blocked from within. Silence reigned, absolute, amplifying the emptiness. A trespasser's unease prickled my skin. I retreated, defeated by locked doors and sealed windows. Mid-afternoon brought another attempt at gathering local lore. To my right, an older pair, silver-haired and methodical, were purging their car's interior. I introduced myself, posed the now familiar question. The man straightened, wiping his hands on a rag, his narrative mirroring the others. Vacant since before their arrival, 5 years past. Some owner vanished, leaving the property adrift, locked and undisturbed. Had they heard anything unusual? He exchanged a glance with his wife, a silent confirmation passing between them, before shaking his head. Quiet as a tomb, he offered, his brow furrowed slightly by my persistence. Never heard a peep. His wife nodded placidly in agreement. Inside my own four walls, the television droned, a futile shield against the insistent question mark next door. Doubt gnawed. Were they all deaf, oblivious, or was I succumbing to some auditory hallucination born of stress and solitude? Tonight, proof. Phone poised, notepad ready, I resumed my vigil by the window. Right around 12:20, precise as a phantom clock, the lament began, fragile but distinct. The phone's red light glowed, capturing the ethereal sorrow. I rose, peered out, nothing but darkness. Slipping out the back door onto the small deck, the air cool against my face, the sound seemed purer, emanating directly from the silent structure. A whispered, "Hello?" was swallowed by the night. A pause in the weeping, a held breath in the darkness. Then it resumed, indifferent to my presence, almost defiant. Back inside, the playback was faint, tinny, yet undeniable. The ghost of a sob, captured. Tomorrow. The non-emergency line, a formal inquiry. The unease demanded action, however strange. The next morning's call yielded a professionally courteous voice, absorbing my improbable tale of nocturnal tears from an empty house. They would dispatch someone, the voice promised. As dusk bled into evening, a patrol car materialized. A single officer emerged, listened patiently to my account, jotted notes. He performed the ritual, tested doors, scanned windows with his flashlight beam, rapped firmly. No response. He shone his light through a small gap he found in one shutter, then returned to me, his expression neutral. "Look secure, unoccupied," he reported. "Could be acoustics, pipes maybe, an animal trapped somewhere in the walls. If you hear it again, give us another call." Polite dismissal, efficiently delivered. He departed, leaving me no more reassured than before. Animals don't weep with such desolate rhythm. The timing, the duration, it felt orchestrated, deliberate. A new plan formed. Tonight, proximity. The fence line, the shared darkness between the properties, perhaps a flicker of illicit light, a shadow's passage. As midnight tolled its invisible bell, I extinguished my lights, donned dark clothing, and slipped into my own backyard, a shadow among shadows. Across the damp grass, towards the chain-link frontier dividing my small patch from the overgrown yard next door, a dilapidated wooden shed slumped in the far corner. The house remained inert, lightless. Then, punctual as ever, the weeping commenced, clearer now from this vantage point, undeniably originating within those walls, filtering through glass and wood. My pulse hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat. Dew or sweat beaded on my forehead. I stood utterly still, listening. A woman's grief, raw and uneven, punctuated by ragged breaths. No words, just the desolate music of sorrow. My throat closed, strangling the urge to call out again. I remained rooted, an unwilling audience to a private anguish. 10 minutes, precise as ever. Silence descended abruptly. Back in the sterile safety of my kitchen, hands trembling faintly, the thought solidified, unwelcome but insistent. Trespass, anathema to my nature, yet the gnawing uncertainty, the possibility of hidden suffering, overruled caution. Not for gain, but for knowledge, for intervention if needed. Was someone trapped, hurt, or merely hiding in plain sight? Daylight reconnaissance revealed a padlocked side gate, confirming the backyard's isolation. The chain-link fence, scalable but conspicuous, was the only viable route. Patience, until darkness offered its cloak again. That night, gloved and clad in a dark jacket, pocket torch and phone secured, I became the intruder. Over the fence, landing softly on the overgrown turf, crouching low, heart echoing the silence. I waited. Right on schedule, the crying began. Ground floor, it seemed, towards the front. I moved stealthily along the side of the house. Windows resisted, shutters held fast. The back door was secured with a deadbolt. Near the steps, a loose plank in the siding yielded a view into a musty crawlspace. Dirt, cobwebs, old insulation, no passage. The weeping continued, softer now, a steady rhythm of despair. Circling to the far side, I found it. A basement window, low on the foundation, a spiderweb crack marring one corner. Tapping gently confirmed the glass was loose. Wrapping my gloved hand around a small, smooth stone found near the foundation, I applied careful pressure to the fractured point. A minute of tense effort, and a shard broke away cleanly. I eased the window inward. Torch beam slicing through blackness revealed a concrete floor, skeletal shelves coated in dust. The smell of damp earth and decay filled my nostrils. Squeezing through the narrow gap, scraping denim against the frame, I landed inside with a soft thud. Utter stillness, save for my own ragged breathing. The weeping was directly overhead now. A set of wooden stairs ascended into darkness, groaning under my weight with each cautious step. At the summit, a door. The knob turned, unlocked. I pushed it open slowly, entering what appeared to be a kitchen. Spectral shapes of appliances under dust cloths, cabinets with peeling paint, a table filmed with grime. A chill, deeper than the night air, permeated the space. The crying emanated from a room to my left. Towards the source, I moved, heart a captive bird against my ribs. Torchlight painted the way into a living room where furniture draped in white shrouds stood like ghosts, paused mid-gesture. And there, in the far corner, huddled against the wall, sat a figure. Jeans, a stained shirt, tangled hair obscuring the face. rocking gently, weeping into bent knees. I froze. The beam of my flashlight found her face. She looked up, startled deer caught in the glare, eyes red-rimmed, glistening with terror. I raised my free hand slowly, palm out. "I'm not here to hurt you." My voice sounded rough, alien in the stillness. She didn't speak, just stared, shaking, her breathing shallow and fast. She pushed herself further back against the wall. "I heard you crying." I tried again, keeping my voice low. "I live next door. Are you okay?" Silence. Then a swallow, a tremor running through her thin frame. Her voice emerged, a low, rough rasp. "Leave me alone." I took a half step closer, keeping my hand visible, empty. She flinched. I stopped. "I just want to help," I said softly. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. She looked exhausted, thin, profoundly stressed. "Go," she repeated, refusing to answer my implied question about her presence. "Get out!" Confusion warred with pity, not a phantom, real, alive. Squatting here, hiding, the nightly ritual remained inexplicable, a performance of grief for an audience of walls. "Okay," I conceded, stepping back towards the kitchen. "I'll go, but I can call someone, maybe help you find a place." A violent shake of her head cut me off. "No, just go." Her voice cracked, ending on a choked cough. The fear radiating from her was palpable, a physical force in the room. Pushing felt wrong, cruel. I turned, navigated back through the kitchen's gloom, found the basement door, and descended the groaning stairs. Back through the basement window's jagged mouth, into the cool night air. Outside, the air tasted clean. Over the fence, back to the mundane safety of my own walls. I locked my door, sat heavily at my kitchen table, hands still unsteady. Relief that she was alive warred with a profound, unsettling pity. She was trapped, not by walls, but by something else entirely. The weeping didn't cease immediately. Night after night, the familiar lament drifted through the wall, but now imbued with the image of her haunted face, her palpable fear. I didn't intrude again, didn't call the authorities. What could they do against such private sorrow? One afternoon, I left a small parcel just inside my backyard fence, near where I'd climbed over, a bottle of water and some sealed snacks. By the next morning, it was gone. A silent acknowledgement, perhaps. I never saw her emerge, never tried to speak to her again. Gradually, subtly, the pattern shifted. The cries softened, grew intermittent. Then, one night, only silence. The following morning, I checked the fence line. Faint footprints in the soft earth led away from the back of the empty house, towards the street, towards the unknown. She was gone. The house remains, outwardly unchanged, its shutters sealed tight. The neighbors, placid and incurious, never asked, never noticed the brief disturbance in the quiet rhythm of the street. My secret knowledge of the weeping woman remains locked within. Sleep comes easier now, though sometimes a trick of memory, a phantom echo of sobbing, surfaces in the deep hours. The doors stay locked. My gaze skims past the shuttered windows next door, careful not to linger. It happened. It ended. And mercifully, it was only sorrow I found hiding in the dark, not something worse. The susurrus first breathed against my ear during a conference call, Ms. Albright unspooling the usual litany of quarterly projections. Almost imperceptible, a silken murmur coiled beneath her monotone efficiency. I jammed the receiver closer. chasing a phantom echo that dissolved as swiftly as it had materialized. 3 weeks has bled away since then, now swallowed by the pre-dawn gloom of my living room, 3 a.m. staining the air. I regard my phone. It rests on the glass coffee table, inert yet potent, like some sleeping viper. 2 minutes past, it began its summons. I know its origin, the caller unseen yet intimately familiar, the same spectral number that has stalked my waking hours and poisoned my sleep, 555-0194. A tremor originates deep within, radiating to my fingertips as they hover near the device. That first insidious whisper. I should have recoiled, severed the connection. The subsequent investigation, a fool's errand into the abyss. But foresight is a luxury the haunted rarely possess. It commenced with deceptive normalcy. Following the Albright incident, the whisper returned, threading through a conversation with my mother the subsequent day. Mere sonic fragments initially, incoherent static clinging to the edges of her words, yet undeniably present. I meticulously swabbed the phone's speaker grill, scanned for errant frequencies, even lodged a complaint with the network provider. A bored technician ran diagnostics, declared the line pristine. "Likely just network traffic, sir. Maybe a weak signal patch," he'd offered placidly. "Call back if it keeps up." It kept up. It festered. Within days, the whispers shed their ambiguity, coalescing into distinct utterances. Still hushed, clandestine, but the words now carried meaning. And with meaning came the first icy tendrils of genuine fear, because the pronouncements weren't arbitrary. They spoke of me, of intimate, immediate truths. "Cerulean shirt," it breathed, while I scheduled a dental cleaning. My pulse stuttered. I glanced down, confirming the precise shade of the button-down I wore. "Coffee stain on the mahogany, left side," it murmured later that afternoon, mid-discussion with a client. My gaze snapped to the dark ring marring my desk, a minor spill I'd neglected. Car unlocked again, wasn't it? This during another call. Indeed, a nagging uncertainty had driven me back to the company lot barely an hour prior, just to check. A clammy dread began to precede every incoming ring, every outgoing dial. My heart learned a frantic rhythm, anticipating that silken voice weaving itself between the legitimate syllables of conversation. I began chronicling each occurrence in a notebook, seeking logic in the intrusions. The whispers initially catalogued the mundane: attire, actions, small lapses. Yet they burrowed deeper, growing more specific, unsettlingly personal. "Still pine for her, Elias?" it whispered as I spoke with my brother, Julian. Only moments before the phone had rung, I'd been lost in an old photograph of Clara, the ghost of her smile still sharp in my memory. Should have visited Dad more. Hospice days were lonely. That barb landed during a sterile work call, echoing the guilt that had shadowed my thoughts only that morning. Desperate, I started recording every conversation, replaying them later through headphones cranked to maximum volume, straining to capture the interloper. Nothing. The recordings remained clean, devoid of the phantom voice. It spoke only to me. The fracture point arrived last week. I was chatting with Leo, trying to feign normalcy, when the voice whispered, clear as poisoned ice, "The pistol remains in the nightstand drawer. correct? Exactly where you secreted it a decade ago. The phone clattered from my grasp, as if superheated. I hadn't laid eyes on that weapon since Clara walked out, hadn't allowed its existence conscious thought in years. No one knew. I'd never confessed its presence to a soul. A soft laugh followed the whisper, dry and brittle, like autumn leaves skittering across cold stone. That precipitated the hunt for the number itself. Every call now blazed with the same identifier, 5555-01994. Dialing it back yielded only a sterile, automated dismissal. The number you have dialed is not in service. I hounded every major carrier. None claimed ownership. None held any record of its assignment. Driven, I retained a private investigator, Mr. Finch, pressing extra cash into his hand for expediency. "This is irregular, Mr. Thorne," he reported back 2 days later, his voice tight with professional curiosity. That prefix, 505, followed by 01, it doesn't conform to standard allocation in this region. It's technically an invalid sequence. It's dialing out from nowhere. I ceased answering. I powered the phone down, removed the battery where possible. Futile. It would reanimate itself, the screen flaring to life, the calls resuming their cadence. The whispers intensified, lengthening, offering real-time narration of my unraveling state. "Your hands tremble again, Elias. Heart rate elevated, 110 beats per minute. Sleep deprivation clocking 37 hours now." In a frenzy, I disassembled the phone, purchased a burner, secured a new, unlisted number. The calls migrated, finding me as effortlessly as heat finds cold. My sanity frayed at the edges. Security cameras bloomed throughout my house, electronic eyes watching hallways and rooms. Yet their recordings revealed only solitude, only me pacing empty spaces, haunted by a voice only I perceived. Last night marked a terrifying shift. Sleep was a distant shore I couldn't reach when the phone's chime split the silence. The voice, when it came, wasn't a whisper. It spoke, measured and conversational. "Do you recall July 15th, 2013, Elias?" it inquired politely. "The evening you trailed Clara, after you witnessed her with him? Remember the precipice you stood upon?" Nausea coiled low in my gut. That night was a sealed vault within me, its contents never shared, never acknowledged, the near horrific act I'd skirted. "You brought the pistol," the voice continued, relentless. "Parked across from his building. 3 hours you sat there, loaded the magazine, ejected it, loaded it once more. But you drove off, a commendable restraint, superior to the impulse currently flickering within you. I slammed the disconnect icon, but the phone erupted again instantly, and again, and again. Which deposits me here, 3 Guaos AM, the living room steeped in shadow, the phone insistent on the coffee table, 5555501194. My hand, an unsteady marionette, lifts the device. I must comprehend. I need to grasp the nature of this entity, its impossible omniscience. "Hello?" My voice is a dry rasp, brittle as old parchment. The whisper answers immediately, sharper, closer than ever. "You truly wish to know my identity?" "Yes," the syllable scrapes my throat like powdered glass. "Check your email." My laptop rests beside the phone, fingers fumbling, I navigate to my inbox. A new message waits. Sender address an impossible string. null. Subject line, void. I click. Within lies only a video file. The thumbnail preview displays my living room. This living room now. I initiate playback. The perspective originates from the shadowed corner behind my sofa. On screen, I watch my own form, hunched, phone clamped to my ear. A timestamp in the lower corner confirms the feed is live, but no camera occupies that space. I installed the system myself, memorized every lens placement. My head whips around, heart slamming against my ribs. The corner remains vacant, steeped in shadow. Continue watching, the voice murmurs through the phone line. On the laptop display, my digital self turns, mirroring my own movement, peering into the vacant corner. Then, from the deepest part of the shadow behind my on-screen representation, something detaches itself. Tall, indistinct, a violation of space and logic. I feel, rather than hear, a presence stir the air behind me, a cold displacement. Remember watching Clara through her bedroom window? The voice is no longer confined to the phone. It whispers directly into the room, into my ear. Recall the illicit thrill, the sense of power it conferred. Now you comprehend the other side, Elias, the feeling of being observed. My limbs refuse commands, locked in paralysis. On the screen, the tenebrous figure extends an arm toward my digital self, its hand mere inches from my shoulder. We've observed you for such a prolonged duration. It breathes, the sound intimate, possessive. Every clandestine moment, every corrosive thought, every secret shame you believed buried. I feel the brush of fingertips against my shoulder, cold, impossibly cold. But we perceive all, don't we? We always have. And the time has arrived for you to join our vigil. You possess such a talent for watching after all. You'll integrate seamlessly. The hand clamps down, a grip of glacial strength. On the laptop screen, the figure's face pivots into the scant light. I see its features coalesce, sharpen into a horrifying clarity. It wears my face, a perfect replica, save for the eyes. Abyssal voids, black holes swallowing all light, promising infinite depth. A scream builds in my chest, but dies soundlessly. The thing bearing my visage leans closer, its exhalation like freezer burn against my ear. Time for another decision, it whispers, a parallel to that night with Clara. Only this time, Elias, driving away is not an option. The room plunges into a deeper cold, the shadows thickening, congealing. The grip on my shoulder tightens, an inexorable pull backward toward those vacant eyes housed in my own features. My phone lies abandoned on the table. It begins to ring one final time. The screen illuminates with the number I now know by heart, 550194. But I won't be answering. The darkness embraces me, absolute and consuming. When they discovered the body 3 days later, the phone was still emitting its futile summons. The coroner cited acute cardiac arrest, though the rictus of profound terror etched onto Elias Thorne's face remained inexplicable. Equally baffling were the logs showing thousands of calls from a non-existent number, and the peculiar video file on his laptop depicting an empty living room, time-stamped to the precise moment of his death. The case file gathers dust, labeled unsolved. Yet sometimes, in the dead hours, telephones ring unexpectedly in darkened houses across the city. Listen closely enough, and you might discern a faint whisper carried on the line. It might even resemble my voice. Just remember, should those whispers begin for you, resist the urge to investigate. Do not seek understanding. Above all, whatever you do, don't answer when that particular number appears, because we are perpetually watching, eternally listening, and it does grow so lonely here in the shadows. We sincerely hope you'll join us. Ring, ring. Is that your device?